Okay. Next topic that has been in the news that we probably need to discuss, hydroxychloroquine.
Okay.
Yes or no?
All right, but I'm only going to do this if you promise that the next topic is trimodal therapy, because I'd rather spend time talking about
Yes.
what works than what doesn't. All right, so okay. Again, there's we can sit here and I can go through paper after paper that I read on a weekly basis about the development of effective therapies, um, and the molecular mechanism of action of drugs that actually we know, are already FDA approved. Hydroxychloroquine is FDA approved. That's a fact. It is used extensively by millions of people to treat arthritis, lupus, and other autoimmune disorders. It has a what I call a significant risk profile, which means that it can damage your retina, leading to blindness. It can damage your kidneys, and the dangerous one is it can kill you because it has an effect on the electrical system of the heart, resulting in something we call QT prolongation, which is measured by EKG. All right, so what does that mean? Your heart sends a signal to the heart has two nodes. These are the electrical centers of the heart. It sends these beats, right? And what happens is the drug accumulates quickly in certain people that have inherent cardiac deficiency, and it can cause the heart to just stop listening to those electrical signals and go into cardiac arrest. And then when your heart stops, if there's not a defibrillator nearby, you die. Which makes it really, really dangerous to take outside of a hospital setting, right? At the doses necessary for lupus and arthritis and all these other autoimmune disorders, it's fine, but you need to be monitored for toxicity. People can take it for their entire, their lifelong on this medication because it has certain specific benefits for these patients. Now, whenever we develop a drug now in this era, that drug was developed, 50, 60 years ago. It's a plant derivative, okay? It comes from the bark of a tree. We discovered it because in Africa and in Asia, traditional medicine would take the bark of this tree and extract the oils and dissolve it, and then you've probably heard of tonic water, quinine water, Schweppes, whatever. This had a protective effect for those who took it regularly. It prevented them from getting a tropical disease called malaria. Malaria is transmitted by mosquitoes. All right. So why did this come into, why does nearly everybody who watches the news know the name of this drug today when they knew nothing about it 6 weeks ago? Well, a doctor in Marseille, France, who has long been an advocate of hydroxychloroquine for multiple other infectious disorders and diseases, significant work in malaria, but also thinks that it has other potentiating or depotentiating effects when it comes to infectious disease, tried it on 36 patients who were suffering from COVID. I have his paper. So his Dr. Didier Raoult, all right? So he published this paper, and I read it. And because of somehow this was reported on because there were patients dying, and they were looking for anything that was coming out that was of benefit. Are we still good? Did we lose John?
Oh, I'm here.
Okay. Are we okay? So he 36 patients. He tried it on them. It was an experiment, and then reported that all but 2 of those patients survived. Okay. And then he said that this is likely effective in the treatment of COVID. Unfortunately, he did not mention that not only did he give them hydroxychloroquine, he gave them a standard treatment along with hydroxychloroquine, which we give in the event of fulminant pulmonary infections, called azithromycin. And also, 88% of the patients received ceftriaxone, which is a 4th-generation antibiotic, IV. So what we learned from this, we learned about the use of hydroxychloroquine in a press release. What we learned from the paper, which came out 17 days later, is all of these other confounding variables. Between the day of the the release of the press release information and the release of the actual scientific data, the press had taken it and ran with it. Okay, and so now we have a snowball. Everybody's saying, well, doctor in France treated all these patients and all but 2 of them survived. And those 2 were going to die anyway. So other people started trying it. And none of these were done in what we call a traditional way. All right. So randomized, double-blinded, control group, all the regular scientific rigor that goes with testing whether something is effective or not. Plus, we have to understand that there's something called, confounding variables. Confounding variables need to be, they're part of the study design to eliminate them. This wasn't a study. This was an experiment. Let's be very clear. So somehow this, crossed the pond and came to our attention here in the United States, and we started seeing advocacy for it. And that rose up the chain all the way to, to the White House. So, so what we needed to do, or what we must do, is step back and understand first the molecular basis of its usage. Where does it act? Okay, we know where all of these other drugs act. We know where the antivirals act and how they act. We've studied them because of 2 decades of molecular biology advancement and the fight against HIV. We haven't gone back to some of these drugs like ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine that we discovered a long time ago that we needed in the fight against, what we call poor man's diseases. Okay, malaria, helminthic, tapeworm, and all these weird 3rd world diseases were treated by these drugs that we have not used. If we haven't used them since we had to fight those drugs 50, 60, 70 years, those diseases 50, 60, 70 years ago. But there are those who want to see whether they are effective because they were effective against those infections, even though they're a totally different class of infectious agent. They were trained in a different era, those doctors, and I am trained in this era where I don't trust a drug unless I can verify its molecular mechanism of action. Okay, it's not a bias. It's just an advancement in thinking. Okay. I mean, if we have evidence at the cellular and subcellular level that's reproducible and that it has a low risk profile, and we've tested it in silico, in vivo, in vitro, in animal models, and in humans, that's the way we do it now. But just giving it to 36 patients along with 2 other confounding medications does not evidence make. Okay. But let me just conclude by the important stuff that John wants me to say. The indications here for hydroxychloroquine are pretty strictly for use in lupus and autoimmune disease. I'm not going to go through this list. It's a waste of time for me to read everything, okay? But the contraindications are very long. They're much longer than the indications. And the toxicity and risk profile is very high. So what we don't want anyone to do is try to buy this themselves or try to convince their doctor that they should prescribe it for them. All right. There is a lot of news that, doctors prescribe off-label all the time, and, they use different drugs for purposes that they know are effective, but aren't necessarily approved or studied by FDA and et cetera. And that is true. And we do advance the science by gathering that kind of evidence and then resubmitting it for tests and lobbying the FDA for approval for new uses. There's no doubt about that. But as far as what my advice goes right now is, one, it's not prophylactic, which means it can't protect you from COVID. There's no evidence that will protect you from COVID. Number two, there is not enough, or there is only anecdotal evidence that it treats COVID effectively. And what I mean by that is the evidence mountain is tiny. So please don't ask your doctor to prescribe it for you if you do not have one of the conditions for which it is indicated. Okay.